Hello Leute, today I want to talk about grief and death. And sadly, the reason I want to talk about this subject is because a dear friend of mine recently passed away so suddenly. He was 38. And last Sunday, he passed away due to a heart attack. It's probably his first heart discomfort, like the first time he's ever felt it, enough so that they actually were on their way to the hospital, him and his wife. But very shockingly and sadly, he did not survive, which is a shock to everyone because one, he's only so young, and two, we only saw each other not too long ago, and three, we're still young. Like our friend group circle is between 20s to 30s. There's only one person that's just above 40 years old. But for the most part, we don't expect to lose loved ones when we're younger, and certainly not people our own age. Call it denial, call it existential amnesia. We all think, subconsciously at least, that we'll live forever. Our loved ones will live forever, when reality begs to differ. I want to bring this very uncomfortable subject, and perhaps even a taboo subject, to the forefront of your mind, because we have 100% death rate, all of us. And now that I'm on the brink of 30 years old, I'm realizing that everyone I love is gonna die one after another. Well, even before I turned 30, I know that logically, but now I'm emotionally having to come to terms with that. This past week has been really tough. It's been tough for me when I've only known him for just a bit over 2 years, and we're not even like the closest friends, but I see him every now and then at friends gatherings. I've always had a good rapport with him. What's been the hardest for me is seeing my friends that have known him longer, that go way back. Some of them have known each other before they were ever adults, have known each other for a decade or even longer. It's been hard for me to see them suffer. It's been hard for me to see the wife and kid on their own. It's gonna be weird to see them again at the next gathering, but without the dad, without my dear friend who passed away. Even though I know logically that even after we die, we don't cease to exist. We just take on a different form, call it spirit, call it going to heaven, right? We move on to a different realm, we take on a different form, but we don't cease to exist. We still are here, but our worlds don't cross over with people that have obviously passed. And when death happens so suddenly and without any preparation, in the moment you're just trying to survive, you're just trying to get by. I think the first month or so, or even half a year, you're just trying to deal with the aftermath. Obviously, I'm speaking of the collective we, not me taking care of the aftermath. But my friend's wife and kid all need to be taken care of. Their family matters, their financial matters have to be tidied up. Like now, we're not even in the grieving stage yet. We're just tying up loose ends, and there's a lot of distraction and denial in the initial phase of grief because you're just literally trying to stay on top of things. I was reading a book called Crying in H Mart, and the author talks about even though the death was very shocking, very sad, she thought she had made peace with it, obviously because her mom was in chemo treatments, getting cancer. Like, you get prepared for that, but the sadness and grief and shock didn't really hit her until she was shopping at H Mart, because that was her key memory with her mom. Shopping in H Mart and seeing little kids cry to their mom triggered her immensely. Luckily, I haven't had to grieve over like my mom and my dad were like really close friends, but I've seen my mom go through that grief 2 years ago over my maternal grandmother, and this time around I'm seeing my friends go through that grief over someone that's so close that they might as well be family. And to me, he's like a big brother as well. It comes in waves. My friends and I talk about it. Some days we forget that he's gone. We're still in denial, obviously. Today is Thursday. He passed on last Sunday, so it's been not even a week. And it's so shocking that it doesn't feel real. Obviously, we're there. We're taking care of the kid, the wife. We're approaching the funeral, and we know that he's gone. But when I wake up, first thing I thought was, there's no way he's gone. Momentarily, you forget that people are gone. And then when you do remember that he's gone, sometimes you're okay. because you're trying to move things along. But then when it gets dark, when it gets quiet, when you see your friend's wife and kid and he's not there, it's going to come back in waves. You just have to ride the waves. There's no shortcut. There's no philosophy, no Zen mindset that can get you out of it, that can short circuit your grief process. And it's not even a good idea to do that. For someone as spiritually inclined as I am, I say cry it out. Like, there's no fighting it. You gotta embrace the tears, let it be. Philosophy is helpful, like knowing what goes behind the mechanics of the afterlife and trusting that your loved ones will go to a better place is one thing. Knowing that is nice, but doesn't take away the fact that you still have to grieve. You still have to cry. You will miss them. It will never go away. You'll never move on from this. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the aftermath of grief as well. First, I want to bring this awareness into the forefront of our psyche, because oftentimes we think, oh, we're only so young. Oh, my friend is only so young. There's no way. It will never happen to us. We don't even think, oh, it will happen later on. We subconsciously delude ourselves into thinking it will never happen. You could be so prepared about your loved ones dying and still not be prepared enough. We're always going to bargain for more, and we're always going to get the worst end of the stick. We go in there thinking we're going to get a few more days, a few more months, and then eventually we're going to come out defeated, debilitated, like everything is just empty. And life goes on. For many people, this is just another day. It's as if nothing has happened. That's the beauty and the cruelty of life. You know, we move on, we forget. In a few generations, no one will ever remember that we ever existed on this planet. But we should remember death. We should almost anticipate it. We should anticipate our own death. If you're of age, I say 40 and beyond. If you have kids, if you have your next kin, even if you don't have kids, you should have a difficult conversation with your spouse, with your loved ones, about your insurance, passwords to things, different accounts. If you have a trust, if you have any retirement funds, you should talk about that uncomfortable things early on when you're still lucid. And you should also prepare for your loved one's death, mentally, logistically, philosophically. I've made peace with the fact that my parents will die, probably prematurely. Not in terms of like them being sick, but like it's always going to be earlier than I expect it to be. It's always going to be sooner than I want them to. And logically, I've made peace with that. Emotionally, I don't know. Grief is grief. You know, you can only be so logical when things fall apart. My friend's wife, who's grieving, who's now sadly a widow, telling me nothing will ever compare to this, at least for a long time. She was trying to play it down because that's her coping mechanism. She was trying to make light of it. I was like, yeah, I agree with you. Nothing will ever be the same. This sucks. Your whole world just fell on top of you. It's as if the sky fell on top of you. So in that aspect, I will never be as prepared as I like to be. But at least philosophically understand that just because they will eventually have passed doesn't mean they cease to exist. It's just going to be very hard to communicate with them. Grief, from what I've seen online, is basically like love that cannot be expressed, love that is communicated one way. And sometimes grief is complicated by difficult relationships. You can have a difficult relationship with your parents and still have a hard time grieving. That's a different kind of grief. That's an unresolved grief. It's more than just love. It's all the things that you wish you would have communicated about, but you yourself have to carry that resolution or imagine a scenario where you can resolve things instead of the two of you resolving this issue. Sometimes we get into this picture perfect idea and think that, ooh, death or prior to death, people will come together and resolve their difficulties. But oftentimes people die not having closure, both with you and with the person that has passed. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about this uncomfortable subject today. I've seen it happen twice in the past 5 years. I think when my grandmother passed, that was hard because having to see my mom be so sad and having to see her pick up herself reminds me of how difficult it will be for me to do the same with her. And I was only 26 at that time, and it just hit home how temporary our lives are. It hit home how soon, even if it's like 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, it's gonna feel like an instant. So it hit me how soon I'm having to deal with death. And this time around, it's someone so young, someone so ingrained and embedded in our community, someone that was a fixture, someone that felt like a home, a base for me, someone that's a big brother that I never would have expected to go away. Over the past few days, I kept revisiting his messages in the past, group messages, funny messages, his online presence. Whenever he comments on someone's Facebook post, I get a notification because Facebook does that. I used to find that annoying, but now I'm going back to all the notifications and seeing his footprint on the internet, and it just doesn't feel real. Maybe it doesn't feel real that he's gone because he's all around us. His presence is still very much alive, and our minds don't work like that. When we think of someone, we don't think, oh, this is the present tense, this is the past tense. I hesitate to refer to him in the past tense because to me, our spirit lives forever. If we can remember him, he's alive in our hearts. Yeah. I actually wanted to film a video about something else today, but something came over me and I just couldn't bring myself to be my usual chipper self. It's not that I'm sad all the time, 24/7. I still laugh, but it's like my life has been overcast with a shadow that probably won't go away right away. I want to talk about death because although my initial reaction was, wow, this is really frustrating, this is really unreasonable. How can the world be so cruel? How can God be so whimsical? Death, one way or another, will happen to all of us. And I actually prefer it that way because when life has a finite point, when life has an end point, you are a lot more meticulous and mindful about your every decision. It's like playing the video game Sims. If you get unlimited tries and there's no penalty and you just get a cheat code in life, the thrill of it, the meaning of it cease to exist. By contrast, if you get a do-over, every time you die, you pass on, you take on a different life, you reincarnate, you move on to a different realm, then you get the opportunity to get out of this material life, which admittedly sometimes feel really nice. It's still pretty sucky, given the fact that we all have to die. We have to see our loved ones die. We get sick, we get old. None of it from the bird's eye view is ideal. I don't have a definite answer about what goes on in the afterlife, but I think eventually passing on gives me another reset button. At least I have a chance to see what it could be like, rather than being stuck in this deteriorating body, this less than ideal living situation with my loved ones all gone. Death in the moment can feel maddening. In the long run, puts everything into perspective and it gives life meaning. So I like you to start thinking about your life in the grand scheme of things, because often we, like I said, fell into this delusion of thinking that life goes on forever. This is going to last forever. And we get so caught up with the everyday stuff. We get so caught up with the logistics of keeping a family life, keeping your business running, keeping your finances together, keeping yourself together, just going about your day monotonously and never thinking beyond that. And suddenly someone's death, someone's passing, someone's sickness will just jolt you out of that fake reality and just really bring things into perspective. This isn't a video on giving you what your life purpose is. I don't have an answer for that. I want you to not start thinking about it from a grim and doom and gloom and sad and dejected and fatalistic kind of way, but more from an abundant, a broad, and an elevated point of view. Like you're beyond this. Like hopefully you realize life is more than what you see. This reality is just the tip of the iceberg. You can only see so much. Like your naked eyes don't even see all the x-rays and red light frequencies, let alone all the other things that are going on beyond our scope of knowledge. So taking all of those things into perspective, staying curious, staying self-reflective. What are some things that you truly care about? What are the priorities in your life? What are some things that you must do or at least aspire to if you, God forbid, die tomorrow? And I hope not. I hope it doesn't happen, but it could happen. It could happen to your loved ones. It could happen to you. And although I don't have a perfect, definitive, final answer, I've done my math. Purpose to me can be a profession, could be what I bring forward in my relationships, could be what I want people to feel feel when they interact with me. It could be my big love, my charity projects, my service to people. So teaching English, for instance, I consider it a purpose because it serves two functions of so-called life purpose that I have. It's a profession. I'm somewhat good at it. I'm not the best, but I'm very passionate about it. I keep wanting to do better. And it also is a service. Even when I'm posting videos for free, even when I started out giving people unsolicited advice on the streets, offline, for free, it was not necessarily because, I wanted to turn it into a business. Not every time, at least. It's mostly because, and it still is because, I wanted to give people access to different worldviews, to information out there because of learning two languages, and one of them being so international and so commonplace gives you more access to a lot of information that you otherwise would not see in just Chinese. I personally benefited a lot from being able to watch something in English without any translation, and one after another reading something in English, reading books in English. I've learned a lot from those books that I otherwise would not have in Chinese, or probably have to wait for the translation of the books. So even before I started making videos, like 10 years ago, before I had anything going on, I've done the math on paper. I was like, okay, if I die tomorrow, I'll be happy because I've dedicated myself to this craft. Although it's not the end all and be all of my entire purpose, because I'm still figuring that out, I'm getting close to what I consider my ideal situation, and I can die happy. It will be sad, but I will be happy. At least the math makes sense in my head. That being said, seeing my friends passing makes me feel vulnerable about the potential of having a family, because being single, although sucks, you're lonely all the time, at least you won't leave behind your loved ones, or God forbid, have them take care of you when you can't take care of yourself if you get a chronic illness. So although logically I'm comfortable with the idea of myself passing, I am not comfortable with leaving my potential children and husband behind when I get married. And there's only so much that philosophy can do. There's only so much that seeing the big perspective can do. I think no one will ever be the same after seeing a loved one die. Grief is not something that just happens in a moment. Sure, you might not be crying all the time. Like 2 years later, 3 years later, you won't be crying all the time, but it fundamentally changes you. Life takes on a different meaning after death. After your death, after someone else's death. And hopefully what it gives you is a broader and newer perspective. You start being more mindful, being more meticulous, being more particular about every decision, what you're about, your life's purpose. And hopefully forego really meaningless stuff. Your ego, wanting more money. Although I'm a big proponent of getting your bag, getting your money's worth, getting your work's worth, getting paid fairly. And being responsible, being financially afloat, so you don't die on the street or have your family suffer. But beyond that, making more, making less, it's all optional. It's not necessity. If you spend your life working, say, in a Wall Street company and an investment bank, and you're working yourself to death, you don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough personal time, and you have other ways to make money, perhaps less money, I would highly, highly recommend taking a second look. I'm not saying you have to quit now. Maybe it's not an option, but at least start taking better care of yourself, because if you don't, best case scenario, you're going to go through life very lethargically, like you won't have anything left when you leave that job, when you leave that work building. And worst case scenario, some people actually drop dead from living in too much stress. I think one of the pitfalls about Western medicine is we start dissecting our health or our body into isolated parts. We don't think our mind has anything to do with our hearts. We don't think our mental health have anything to do with our physical health, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine or Indian Ayurvedic medicine or just indigenous shamanic medicine. We've all been taught that everything is connected. So if you're mentally overwhelmed, your body will for sure follow. By then, it's too late. So you want to start with prevention. Even if you don't want to start thinking broadly or thinking like, oh, what's my life purpose is about? If you don't want to be all woo-woo like that, start thinking self selfishly for your physical health, because everything going on in your body first started with over here, with your surroundings. Okay, I feel like death and grief are things that should be taught in school. Definitely should be talked about early on, as early as possible. Maybe before 10 years old is too early, but definitely when the child is aware enough, conscious enough, we can start having this difficult conversation. And if you're avoiding it to no end, you're just deluding yourself. Probably because people don't have this conversation with their children, probably also because they themselves haven't had that conversation with their own self. We all think this is not going to happen to me right away. This is never going to happen to me. Some of us do think like that, even just subconsciously. I certainly did. Not anymore. It's not smart to avoid reality, you know? So that's my main message for you. That's my podcast. Sorry for the sad nature of it, although I don't think death intrinsically is sad. I think suddenly saying goodbye without being prepared is sad. Not having an outlet to put your love is sad, but to me it's like saying goodbye to your family when they go on vacation. You see them take off, they go on an airplane, and you won't see them for a time. For some of us, that time is very long because we lose our loved ones young and we don't die until later, but eventually we'll meet again in a different realm. It's just a matter of when and how. Alright, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!